Okay. All right, good morning, everyone. First, I just want to say thank you so much for coming this morning. I know that maybe you didn't have much of a choice to be here, and there are probably likely other places you might want to be this Saturday morning, but thank you so much. I'm really hopeful that today we get to just have some maybe really great, just group conversation about some of this data and some of the things that we're seeing and stuff. So thanks for being here, and meaningful. I know it'll be meaningful with all the time. So we'll officially call this meeting to order. We're fine just doing a quick roll call, and maybe just attach how you're doing this morning, and maybe something you're looking forward to coming up soon.
I'll start with the birthday person.
Sure. LaFerndon, superintendent, I am feeling really good about this weekend. So yeah, tomorrow happens to be my birthday. I get to spend it at the Seahawks game with all three of my boys. My oldest is coming in tonight, so I pick him up at the airport. Gonna be here for about a week. So we're gonna go to the Seahawks game. And then, maybe some dinner afterwards. So that makes pretty much my whole year.
So you don't care who goes in your direction?
Sure. Karen Martin, Director of Communications. I don't know a lot more this weekend, but going on 2 walks with friends.
Dave Larson, District 5, and actually looking for, I've been working with robotics, but Cafe for a while, and I think we're finally going to get the new version of Lego robotics after about 10 years of working with the old one. So hopefully that'll come in and we get that going next time.
Edna Morris, District 4. Looking forward to spending some time decorating with my grandsons this afternoon.
We'll finish around the table and then we'll go to the folks online.
Oh, sorry,
Why not?
taking minutes. Deborah or.
How are you doing? Something you're looking forward to in the future?
I'm doing pretty good, and I'm looking forward to getting all my shopping done like by tomorrow.
Whew,
I know.
maybe I'll start tomorrow.
I'm Allison Dino, Executive Director of Governmental Services, pre-K-12, and I'm looking forward to both my kids who are obviously coming this week, so the next is about.
Good morning, Dr. Bourget, Chief Academic Officer, and I am feeling good. And I'm looking forward to the holidays. I get to go to Chicago and go to a Bulls game and just spend time with family.
Carly Hoover, Director of District 1. Feeling pretty good. Saturday morning, got coffee in my hand. Fine with that. I love the holiday season, particularly holiday parties. I'm going to my first holiday party tonight, so I'm excited about that.
And Brianna and mom called last night, asked me to come over this weekend and hang lights. I think I'm looking
What a good son. And then to our folks online, Director Bolerjack, if you want to start.
Jan Bolerjack, District 2. Today is I love the agenda today. I'm just ready to talk about all of it. My challenge is that I will need to sign off at about 10 because today is the annual meeting for my church, which is a high stress, high whatever. So I'm dealing with that, and I drove to Queen Anne this morning to pick up one of my church members who forgot to get up and get ready. So that was a disappointment already. And then I get to do a wedding this afternoon for a couple of our Venezuelan refugee or asylum seekers. And so today's something else, but I'm glad to be able to spend at least an hour with you. And can I just note that you guys are garbled and very soft. I've got my volume all the way up, and I don't know about you, Jeff or Veronica, if you're hearing well, but I'm not hearing everything that people are saying. If you could speak up and maybe speak more slowly. Thank you.
Thank you for that note. Who else do we have online?
Jeff Baker, Executive Director of CTE Data and Technology Services. I can't do much with my knee this afternoon, but I think my son is going to stop by, and that's always a pleasure to hang out with him and talk with him and check in with him. So looking forward to today.
Jeff, are you hearing us as garbled and speaking softly?
A little bit. I've got my headphones on, so that helps a lot. That's why I wear them, because it comes through just a little bit cleaner on my headphones.
We'll play around.
Hi,
with it.
Veronica.
Sorry, go ahead, Veronica. My bad.
Sorry. Hi, Veronica Birdsong, Chief Financial Officer. I'm just looking forward to doing Christmas decorations. I know we're kind of late in the game, but we will be doing our Christmas decorations today.
All right, anyone else on there that I just can't see the participant list, so. All right, oh, hi. And then she appears. I know, wow, Veronica just walked in the door here, Jeff and Jan, that's why we're all doing that. Okay, anyway, all right, we'll move to the approval of the agenda for this morning's meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so it stands approved. So we've got 4 items for discussion, and we'll start with the LAP high poverty grants. Do you want a second to kind of get settled in? We could switch that around. Yeah, for sure. I assumed you were gonna kick that off, or were you gonna kick that off, Dr. Burchett? Okay, then we could jump into CEE first. Would that throw 2 people off, or is that allowed? Could we just approve the agenda in this order?
I think you can move around.
Great, let's do that. That way, someone can settle in a little bit. Great, so for the CEE data dashboard portion, I think there were a few components. I know, and I'd actually love to kind of maybe check in with each board member and like, what do you really hope to do during this time? I know one of the hopes that I had is really, have some conversation with you all about kind of where you're seeing some meaning in this data, and really like how you and we collectively are looking at data like this, and like how, with what kind of lens and what pieces, and what are we doing, what kind of questions are we asking around it. So just to kind of, I was hoping to kind of walk away with a little bit of a better understanding of how you all process through this type of data, and then again have kind of like a collective approach and mindset around it a little bit. So yeah, just some discussion. That was kind of my hope.
Yeah, I can start. So one of the things, I mean, there's a tremendous amount of data here, obviously, and it's the way it's presented. I mean, CE kind of, CE kind of cuts it in different ways. Some of them are interesting, some of them are a little takes a while to sit there and digest it all. There's so much stuff, and so for me, part of the I went through it and kind of pull out some things that struck me, but there's kind of 2 things I'm probably most interested in is how are we as a district using this? So, at the district level, at the building level, what is each group, because it's, it goes down to the building level and then at the district level, what is each group, how are they looking at it, and what are they pulling out as important to them, and translating that into whatever actions, we want to take. So that's because typically what we've had is kind of a high level view of some of it, but it never kind of gets to where the actions are. So how is each building is gonna look at it a little differently potentially, and how are they taking that and looking at it? So, and I guess I understand that's maybe what the session on Tuesday is gonna be about, at least at the elementary school level, how they're looking at using it. That's number one. And then number two, at the high level is, which of these do we want to be kind of using as potential SMART goals for some of the high level strategic plan stuff that we're looking at. I mean, there's a lot of good information in here about social emotional learning. There's stuff about professional development. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in here, and we could pull out some of them. One of the ones that I'm favorite, I always like to use is, there's questions about, do you see yourself in the curriculum? So the students are looking at, so that gives us a good idea about, is our curriculum relevant to students and so forth. That's one I like to track over time. And a lot of these, we do need to track over time. And sometimes, I mean, they show like typically 1 year, maybe 2 years, sometimes maybe a little longer than that. So anyway, those are at the high level. I don't know, the ones that were particularly interesting to me was, there's a whole section on belonging, particularly for students. And we actually, one of the things they do is show how we do relative to other districts that I don't know how many districts they give this to, but it was interesting that, the student level, and this is, of course, these are given at the student level, the staff level, and the parents level. So we seem to be doing pretty well, pretty high on the belonging side of things. It's interesting to me that also when you look at some of the student stuff, and this is one that's been going on for a while, is not so good about questions like respect for other students' behavior, which ties in nicely to the ruler stuff, ties into the safety, committee, the task force that we're working on. So it's those are areas that it seems like we could pull out some of those for tracking to see how, as we move forward. The ruler one, I mean, there's also the staff was, kind of rated low about, do we have a good social emotional framework? Well, that's what ruler's supposed to be about. So what that tells me is, we may have the right concept, we haven't really fully implemented it yet, so training and so forth. So that's, and then, yeah, there's some recommendations come out of the safety task force that will be relevant to this area. It's interesting that the family ones is always, there's the ones about rigor, and this is one the students I think bring up too, about needing more challenging and rigorous classes. Over the years I've asked, for example, our students that take Running Start, why do you want to do Running Start? And it's typically they want more rigorous classes, they get college credit, obviously a big financial issue, and then they want to put up with the drama of high school. I'm not sure we can do a whole lot about that one, but well, we can do something, because that deals with the social emotional aspects of it and how you deal with that. So we can actually do something about all three of those things. But so and families are they want, rigorous classes for their students as well. They want good academic, and which makes sense. I mean, so that's one of the ones that they're looking at. Staff ones I pulled out, we're still working on the kind of central office support for the buildings. And I think that's been an issue for us over the years, partly because, we have a lot of turnover in the central office. And so to kind of establish those links and establish those trust takes time. And if you're turning over, then it becomes difficult. So that's still an area that I think need to continue to work on. Anyway, those are just some that kind of stood out to me.
Well, I just think a lot of information that we need to kind of really analyzed. And I was also wondering, is there information in here about school enrollment? I mean, how we get more school enrollment and what would our policy be for improving that? I did not look at it in great detail like Grant said, so, is there information visible?
I think as it relates to that, I'd be curious, super curious to know, like, if there's correlation between not feeling safe in school, not feeling respected, to dropping out or to transferring. So I think there's a correlation to make between this data somewhere and what we're seeing around decreased enrollment, but it's not directly in this
Right.
particular data.
So how do we use this information to improve enrollment? I mean, there has to be some clues in there for us to get our enrollment
Yeah.
plan up and going.
I think it also ties to rigorous courses and
Yeah.
those kinds of things, because in quality, CT programs, I mean, the course offerings, and it also ties to curriculum. That's why I always like to look at BC itself in the curriculum. Is the curriculum engaging for students? I mean, all those things create a better environment, and then you can start to get word of mouth, more students.
I think the CTE classes are helping in that respect, but just we're declining instead of increasing, or at least hold our own.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing how the schools use this and how the central office uses this in support of the schools. So what's the central office seeing in this that can be enhanced from the central office position? But I would love to be a fly on the wall at a school staff meeting when they looked at this to see, does it feel like it's representative? Do they feel like their voices are actually reflected? How many of them actually did the survey? I know the number is there, but I'm not a statistician, so I don't quite get it. But were their numbers represented well? And then the thing that always strikes me is, the individual, especially I'm talking about the staff angle, the individual is open to change and willing to be held accountable, but they don't see their co-workers in the same light. And that just feels like that's a place to start working and have the staffs under their principal leadership looking at that and building on that. Because if our staff don't trust each other or don't believe in each other, which I think those things say to a certain extent, then that is, something we can work on. And for me, those things just come through conversations and having enough conversation among staff to be able to build that kind of trust and ability to hold one another accountable, or the ability to explore something new. So I'm really looking forward to it, what schools report back to us. And for me, the schools need to report from a holistic place. I would be a little leery if it's just 3 or 4 people from a school that get together and look at this. To me, it feels like it needs to be a whole workshop within a school. So I don't know how they're approaching this within the schools, but I'll be interested to see what they come back with.
I guess the one other thing I was looking at in some detail also was the safety area, and particularly students, the area I worry about my safety at school in the following areas. And because there's some pretty low ratings in some of those, and some of these are tied again to the safety, to the cyberbullying, fights, assaults, gang activity, harassment, intimidation, bullying, illegal drugs, theft of personal items, vandalism, weapons. One that was, and I get all of those. One that I was kind of curious about was the physical condition of the building, which was only about about half the students rated that as safe, which was interesting. And so I went actually and broke it down at the building level, and it was interesting that most of the low ratings came from Tuckahoe Elementary and Thorndike, which I have no idea. I'm not, there must have been maybe there was something going on at that building at the time of because there was quite a contrast. Cascade View was like twice, and that's one of the oldest buildings that we have, and yet. So I don't know, that was just kind of odd. I mean, I'm not sure what was going on there, but these other areas, a lot of these, kind of hopefully relate to some of the stuff that's going on in the safety committee around, particularly around bullying and gangs and all that kind of stuff. So that's an area where needs some attention.
So I guess I'd just love to kind of maybe open it up, kind of hearing a little bit of what we, shared, kind of what maybe is coming up for y'all, or maybe a kind of good place to start again. I want this to kind of be a collective generative conversation.
I can say for me, when I started in July, one of the things Dr. Herndon made sure was that there was a conversation with Dr. Steach, the person who facilitated this. And in that conversation, we talked about some of what is going to be most important for the new school leaders who have 2 new school leaders at the elementary that would impact their start and they can build on, as well as the principals who are already in place, the leaders. And it was, is your staff ready for change? And looking at that area, open to newness, to new ideas, willing to change, willingness to work at change, and willingness to be held accountable, was the areas that we focused on at the schools. So each principal we had a conversation with them, and then Dr. Speech himself had a conversation with Mr. Crow. He was the last one to be hired. And so that is what we then started working on as it relates to the strategic plan. Building from this information and then coming up with the acronym here, high expectations, engaged learners, relationships, and then equity and empathy coming from here so that we can narrow it down and begin to focus. And so in the different areas, we have different strategies that we are looking at and then looking to get some more feedback from staff and students, since we've already done it with our parents. So that has been how it has informed what we're doing in teaching and learning.
We also had conversations when we were going into the school year with Dr. Steech. He's the person who heads up the Center for Educational Effectiveness now, but we've been doing the CE survey for years before. He's been the lead for CE for, I think, the last 3 years, but we've been doing the survey for that. And one of the conversations we had about the coaches, the executive coaches for them, was also focusing on the CEE data, having them work with the principals on reviewing the data. What does it look like? What's the most impactful areas? What are the areas that you're seeing within your building that you feel are areas that really need to be focused on? And so that was part of the charge for this year, as well as for their coaches to really be working with them on looking at some of that data. There's more than just that data, obviously. We also try and look at another one of the surveys we give is Healthy Youth Survey, which gives us additional information about other aspects. And I think those two surveys actually give us quite a bit of insight of what we see there. Both of these are anonymous, which I think allows for that ability for people to hopefully be honest in what it is they're giving us the feedback on. And to some of the points earlier, like seeing how things may change over time, like, are we closing that? I'm open to change versus my colleagues are open to change. Are we narrowing that gap, that kind of I versus we, I versus they kind of items? And obviously, we want to continue to see the support in the buildings from central office, that gap narrow as well, so that people feel better. But there is a ton, as you know, I mean, there's a ton of data and information in there, so.
And what's the reporting back on those from those executive coach conversations with the principals? Was there something put in place on how they were report back? Is that what we're seeing on Tuesday?
No, it's Tuesdays, the school improvement plans.
Oh, okay. So is there any report back?
There will be eventually at the later on in the spring, so we're having check-ins with the coaches to see how it's going.
So I think kind of to some degree, what I'm hearing, so certainly the connection that you're making with the work that's being done on the strategic plan, but it sounds like at the building level, they're kind of like, they're just doing that at the building level. Where's the connection? Like, are there opportunities where y'all as a team are sitting together and dissecting this and saying, you know, here's where as a district, we see these particular opportunities to improve, right? Which is where, you know, those get built into those SMART goals. And then together sit with all the administrators and say, okay, let's look at your data. What are you seeing here that aligns with our full district data and these things that we've identified that we're going to see some growth in? So I guess where is the alignment? And I think that speaks to, there's this one on page 11 on the characteristics of improving districts, that the alignment between the district improvement team and the individual school improvement teams is clear. And the majority, like 75%, is seldom true all the way to almost never. So that means there's a clear lack of alignment. And I think this is something that we really have an opportunity to do a little bit differently. So maybe, you know, now's the time we could talk even about like, what would that look like to do that differently?
Let me restate what I believe I heard. As our schools have rolled out, there are a lot of different things that they are managing. And one of the things that we tried to do is help narrow the scope for our principals, because there are a lot of different things that they're managing. And so the things that we wanted to manage or help them narrow the scope on was the relationship building, because of the information that we received in CEE, indicating that there was lack of relational trust. So we also wanted them to focus on student belongingness, because there was indication, or there was a section on belonging. And then with that, we're implementing Ruler. And so we implemented the school charter, the staff charter, the mood meter, and then they're working on one other section, meta moments, for Ruler. So those were the areas that we wanted them to focus on in this grand scheme of things. And so you'll see that in their school improvement plan. So that's the connection from CEE data, strategic plan, the district improvement plan, and then back into the classroom. So that was the through line that we were drawing. And not overwhelming them, so we can get some wins here. The elementary schools are, when they do their presentations, they're going to talk about how the area that they are focusing on is going to be improving. And you'll see that they are going to be focusing on that area of the accountability, the willingness to change.
I think another connection, so at the beginning of the year, we did in cabinet, one of the things that we talked about was looking at that CE data, and each department, looking at how that CEE data reflects on kind of their connections to the building. You know, my philosophy is that the central office really is in service to support the buildings. The buildings are the center where things happen, and we're supporting a lot of those efforts just to make sure that they can do that. You know, we're trying to, my thought was always like, as a principal, it was to eliminate as many things so that teachers can teach as unobstructed as possible, right? To be able to streamline things. Of course, you gotta get feedback, you gotta provide the guidance, but really to do that at the central office level, it's the same way to help and support principal. Let them be able to lead the buildings and make a lot of the other items that they have to get done, like as seamless as possible.
Certainly,
Yeah.
certainly. And I'm not suggesting that we take anything away
Yeah.
from buildings, building leaders. I think what I'm thinking about is, okay, so let's, looking at the toolkit, example, on page, what page? There's not a page number on this particular one. So I'm looking at this: do staff and students respondents share common beliefs and perceptions for academic press? So I'm just using this as an example. Instruction is personalized to meet the needs of each student. There was about a 12-point difference between 2021 and 2020, or 2020, 2021 and 21, 22. So I guess what I'm wondering is, like, are we looking at some of those things and saying, what were some of the behaviors that were happening in 2021 that were where instruction was personalized? We were able to do that more effectively. What were some of the behaviors that were happening in the buildings? And then saying, okay, why, and then why did it decrease? Did those behaviors stop? Did other things change? Were there other factors? And then really dissecting that. So it's not necessarily just that, you know, a prescribed that ruler is going to fix all of these things, right? Though I think it can certainly impact, but really looking at what are the behaviors that impacted the change from one year to another, which is, I think, why, you know, Director Larson is always looking for that over time progression, so that we can actually look at those points in time and say, what was happening then? What can we learn from that moment in time compared to this moment in time? And then really focus in on that as the component of improvement. And that's where I think you have to have buildings, everyone from all levels of the building to be in that space to say, yeah, what was contributing to the teachers' ability to personalize and meet the needs of each student was this. Great. What happened now that you're not able to do that? Right. So that's more, I think, of what I'm asking about when I say, like, how are we having great conversations using this to actually determine what it is we're going to do next.
Okay, so that provides clarity, because in our mind and teaching and learning, we took the information, use it to help build the strategic plan, and then focused on that, the information that we pulled from the CEE data. And those became our big buckets of focus. But if you're suggesting that we need to go back and then do this particular page and focus on this particular area, then we can do that. But that is not the way teaching and learning approach this.
I want to clarify, I'm not saying this particular page, I'm
Yes.
using this page
Yes.
as an example. Yeah, I think it's more, again, the, just the, I don't know, never mind, I'll come back, processing.
I hear, Carly, what I hear you saying is that it's the conversation around these things that you're hoping for. So the conversation with the staff or with the paras, or, you know, just putting a situation in front of them saying, why do you think this changed? Why do you think this happened? What were we doing differently? And so it's hard. We can't do that from the board or even from central administration. We have to do that at the building level with those who participated in that. And so I think it's, I hear Carly saying, how do we facilitate those conversations to be able to get at the root causes for the changes in statistics, rather than just looking at the statistics?
Yeah, and I can understand that, and that's why we do try and work with the principals on, these are some of the areas or the gaps, that's why they're within their buildings, because some of those areas are different in each building, so they're stronger in some buildings than in other buildings. Right, so at the building level, at this, again, at the central office level, we do try and look at those areas also where we think those areas can be improved, whether it's around communication or more physical alignment, which is, I think what will help close that gaps is people want to be able to see that, and as a board, we stated those things too, like, how does the grant we're getting supported with the professional development that we have in alignment with the strategic plan or the district improvement plan, how's it supported the school improvement plan? Those kind of visible through lines and alignment really help with the clarity about, okay, this makes sense. Like, this is why we're having the professional development at this time, or this is why we're having a conversation. I think if I'm hearing this correctly, that's what I'm hearing Dr. Borsche talk about. This is helping with the alignment, which, as I'm hearing you, is like, that's great too, but there's so much information in the CE data. There are other things that may be meeting the attention that maybe aren't these direct questions. So for something like the student feeling of safety, or the I'm open to change, but my colleagues aren't open to change, that might not appear visibly as like one of the main areas, although I think it does because it speaks about relationships. But it could be an important support area that does support some of the other things. It's like, this is how we're looking at the data and how can we have these conversations when we get into challenging pieces around that, or there might be even something that says, if I'm in the principal of the building, that the primary grades all feel like they're really connected. The intermediate grades maybe don't feel like they're connected. So as principal, like, how can I do that? And if we're supporting the principals, like, how can we help facilitate that conversation too? Or is there something we're missing at the central office to help support whatever that disconnect might be? So, I mean, there, again, with so much data and information, like, there's just, you can go a lot of different ways with it. But I think it's always important to look at all of it and then pick up the pieces that we think can be supportive of the areas that we think are going to help us with the overall alignment, as well as not miss or have something that could be bubbling up and turn into an issue later on.
I guess one of the things I would add is anytime we look at data, either from the board level or the central office level or wherever, I think we have to ask ourselves, are we guessing what the impact or what the data is telling us, or have we asked enough questions to actually know? And I think sometimes we look at this data and we make an assumption. We decide, oh, this is what this says, rather than taking the time and going and asking all the questions. And I just want us to keep that in the back of our brains. Are we guessing, or do we know?
Which is why it's important to have the conversations within the building of what was going on at this time. How, what is different now? And the staff is who knows. It's the same way when Dave brought up, let's look at the curriculum that we were doing for curriculum and compare it to what we're doing now. There's a big gap. And it seems like we're losing ground. So why are we not having those conversations with the staffs who are so involved, So I appreciate Connie's point of, let's have the staff look at it as what were we doing then and what are we doing now? Because I think sometimes when we get this data, we just kind of panic because it's not what we want. How can we analyze it in such a manner of, how can we make improvements? Where were we then? Where are we now?
Okay, I want to, this is helpful conversation and dialogue. I'm looking at just an example. What page is this? Page 5 on 13 says, academic placement is not influenced by race, gender, or socioeconomic levels. Okay. As an example to this conversation, when there was discussion about students being assessed for highly capable, one of the conversations that was, one of the suggestions that the building had was the teachers should decide, or the teachers can decide on that. And that doesn't eliminate teacher bias when students don't look like them. And so students should have the opportunity to show what they can do in order for them to either eliminate themselves or to be placed in the program. So this data is being used, but I'm understanding that we need to have more conversations and be intentional about how we've received this and what we are doing with this information. Because as I look at this, when we sit down and have conversations with the building principals, they are saying, here are some of the things that we are working on. Our staff believe that our students can meet standards. And in working through that, the conversation is, some people use Common Core state standards and some people don't. And so when you get a response, you know, it just informs what we should be doing next. And as a result of that, we did have training on Common Core state standards. So this information is being used, but I hear your point in terms of, let's have more conversations about what needs to be done to make sure that when you see this questionnaire or you hear us asking you to do certain things, it is as a result of what the feedback that you all have given us so that we can move this along.
Yeah, I think just to support Jan's idea about a lot of this data, when we're looking at it, for me, a lot of times you look at a piece of data and it pops up a red flag that it doesn't necessarily tell us how to solve the problem. It tells us we need to focus on that area and ask more questions. So for example, the one example you brought up about do you believe students can meet standards? You know, to me, that's one, and I think it was also there was the do you believe the students, and then there's do your colleagues believe, and there was a gap. And so that is one of those areas that to me cries out for, we need to go deeper into that to figure out, you know, why do people think that? And what is it? Is it because you know, the system is not structured properly for some students? Is it because the curriculum is biased? I mean, there's a whole set of other questions that call out for that. So yeah, I think that's yeah, a lot of the data that we get does not provide the answers. It just provides areas that we need to go. And a lot of times, and I don't think we typically use enough of, you know, focus groups. I mean, we need to get maybe a few teachers and we may need to bring in a facility. I mean, I know there are people that are expert in doing focus groups and to, you know, really dive into the depths of what's really going on there. And, you know, it's probably more nuanced than we think. And so, yeah, that's, I agree with that.
Well, I think in addition, this is also, we do have some of these conversations in the planning around our race and equity PD and training as well. Like we look at all of these pieces to try and see how we can make some of these connections. I think part of that is that we could do a better job. It's just being more explicit about those connections, about why and how we're trying to connect those pieces.
Yeah, and I think it kind of comes down to, I use the word behavior a few times, but like, what is the behavior actually, right? What is the act? What is the thing that is making that connection, right? Or yeah, I think that explicit around the connection, I think is useful, because oftentimes we just hear, we made the connection, right? And that, because I'm not seeing it, I'm having a hard time really letting that sink in that that's true, right? To some degree. Kind of one thing is I also wanted to name it, I think both of y'all have spoken to, there is so much data even aside from the CE, and I think we as a board have collectively been asking for how are all of those data pieces being used together, right? To really push our vision forward rather than seen as these individual data pieces. And I'm sure that y'all are doing that, but we're not seeing that, or at least I feel like I haven't been able to see at a high level. Here's a connection of all these different data points and why we're using these different things. Because the reality is if we're not using this beyond if we're not, this is not an inexpensive survey, right, to utilize them. And so if we're not really utilizing it in a way that is actually making meaningful movement, and really getting to that root of the problem, then this is just superficial information that's not helping us. And then we're spending a lot of money on information that we're not really doing a lot with. Not to say again that it's not contributing. I'm not trying to minimize. I think one other thing I'm curious about too, again, thinking about that longitude, and I'm not the right word. Thank you.
Longitudinal.
Yes, thank you. Even around the staff readiness for change, there's actually an increase, right? So I think it's actually interesting too, if that's the thing as a district that even John Steach recommends that we focus on, I'd be curious as to why, when we're seeing a positive increase towards change between 2020, 2022. So then the question becomes for me, right, what are we doing well that has increased that? Okay, let's keep doing that and let's focus over here too, right? So I think it's a little bit interesting why that was his recommendation, and then what questions y'all asked to really dig into, well, why is that your recommendation based on the trend that we're seeing? Because we're obviously doing something well to be moving that in the right trajectory.
And part of that conversation was because students say that there's a lack of rigor, do we keep doing the same thing? And so if you say you're ready to change, then let's introduce this concept of more rigor. So that was, to your point, you say you're ready to change. Okay, so let's add the rigor because students are saying we need more rigor.
And how do we hold that conversation with students, a real conversation with students about rigor? If they're disappointed in the rigor, what do they want to see?
Yeah, and I think again, for CE at least, I mean, we have the three big stakeholders in there. You have parents, students, and staff. And so hopefully the areas that we want to see to continue growth by all three. So if we're saying to the rigor point, if staff feel that they're presenting rigor, but parents and students don't feel that, then we're not really making the progress, even though staff may think, oh, we're really making the progress, but ultimately the students who are in the classes don't feel that, then we're not making the kind of progress that we want. But that then leads to what you're talking about. So then how do we have the conversation about how that gap is between, as staff, we feel that we're moving in that direction, but our students still don't feel that. So how do we get to that particular piece?
And the other one, because we haven't talked so much about the third triad, and that is the parents side of this. And when you said focus on relationships, I was immediately thinking, well, relationships with who? And obviously, I mean, we're talking about staff and students and parents. And, the parents, one of the things that came out was they don't, kind of low ratings in terms of parents' involvement in decision-making. And so we have the parent advisory group, which I think is a good step along in that direction. But yeah, that's another group that, we've had kind of interesting at the building level stops and starts about, meeting parents, like when they come in before school and having a place for them to sit and talk with the principal maybe. And so, that's a whole interesting area to me because, and how we, increase that relationship. I don't know if buildings, my perception is we've kind of gone away from that, but I don't know, we have two new principals, like you say, and so, things always kind of restart.
But even the two new principals are coffee with the principal.
Yeah,
And
yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Having
Yeah.
meetings with parents.
Okay,
And then at the middle school, they come for specific reasons. Like, okay, we're going to be talking about college trip, so
Yeah.
parents would come in for that particular reason, so, yeah, we continue to
Yeah.
build on that.
Yeah, and that's good. So kind of bringing those up when the buildings talk about this is how we're improving relationship with parents, I think would be really helpful. Because they're a key, they're also one of these ones that are talking about rigor. And so we need to get feedback, do you feel like your student is being challenged? What do you see and that kind of stuff?
Just wanted to check in with some folks, no pressure or anything. I know it's, may or may not feel like your area, but I'm curious if there are anything, thoughts that you will have to add or.
Want to draw Miss Martin in working with the postcards for them, for children in schools. So we're working on the postcards as a result of us having conversations with the admin team at the beginning of the year. And so those postcards at some point should be available soon, right? So, but meaning that communications is also a part of our journey in helping us make sure that we connect with students, and in connecting with the students, families feel connected as well. So, thank you.
Yeah, that's another thing to bring up because that also addresses the parent
Mhm,
connection thing. So,
mhm.
yeah, it's good for us to see all these, all these things listed. This is what we're doing, this is
Okay.
what we're doing, so that we, oh yeah, we get their alignment.
Okay.
I mean, I think there are a lot of things going on. Sometimes I don't always see them all.
Yes.
And so, yeah,
And I think if you have those conversations with the staff, not the students, they understand the rationale. Sometimes you just need to explain to them the rationale of why we're doing something. I think sometimes you forget that part. It's a lot more volume.
Yeah, thank you.
I know, I'm just
Please.
listening to all
No,
this
no.
stuff. And, since I've been here, it seems like work is siloed. Like, you have this school who does this, just this, and only at this school. And this school over here does this, which is completely opposite of this, although they're all elementaries. I just feel like there's no consistency across there. And then it goes to groups. We have PTAs at schools. Why aren't we tapping into what they are doing and checking in with them? Do the principals meet and have conversations about, like, the elementary schools, they meet? Do they have conversations? What are they doing? Do they meet with secondary? We're preparing them to go that way. So, I don't know, is there a way we can make just a very simple sheet of who does what, where, what is coming out of those meetings? How can we connect it so it all leads up to the big?
Great suggestions. The principals meet monthly. We also we've started inviting their executive coaches. We've had meetings with them, so that they understand the work that we are doing. And we have said that we are going to invite, well, the principals is the elementary, the secondary, they all meet. What I am learning from those meetings is that the elementary schools have unique needs and the secondary schools have unique needs. And so even though the principals meet monthly, we call them our principal learning network. What I also want to do is then have separate meetings with the elementary schools, because I'm finding that they have unique needs. And even as first year principals, they are having unique needs. And we are working on what is happening. Who does what, because there's a lot of, okay, this needs to be done and this person picks it up. This needs to be done and this person picks it up. So we're working on who is going to be doing what. And we can share our minutes out if that is helpful to everybody. But yeah, we do that. And then we have a department meeting as well.
so just to, play off at the same time, they have unique needs, at the same time, there needs to be some through lines, and particularly one of my favorite subjects, math. that's one where we really, I think we've missed the boat.
Mhm.
Because we've stuck in these silos at elementary school, and is why I think one of the reasons we're having trouble with math is those connections. Elementary school needs to prepare the students for middle school needs to prepare them.
Mhm.
And that typically has not happened well in math, and so, and I guess, I don't know if this came up or not, but, we do have the ability on these surveys to ask put in some questions that we want, so. One of the questions that for me is always, and whether it goes here or somewhere else, I don't know, but is to ask students, particularly at the elementary level. Do you feel like you're good at math, or do you feel comfort, some question like that, because what I've seen over the years is that's where students get off track in math, and once they get that in their head, it's gone, And I talked to our high school teachers teaching like pre-algebra, and one of his biggest things is to convince the students
That they are.
that you can do math.
Mhm.
And so, anyway, that would be one I'd love to track over time, because I think that goes back to the elementary schools and say, you can't let, the students go
Mhm.
thinking that they're not good at math, and that's one we need to track over time, so.
And SFUSD. Not plugging them, but they do ask those questions.
Yeah, there you go,
Are you good? Do you feel like you're good in math?
yeah,
And they begin the lessons with that, and then over the course of the year, they ask you again, and then at the end of the year, they ask you again. So yeah,
yeah,
And I think that fits into the,
SFUSD, that's one of our math. highlights. Yeah.
that fits into the high expectations piece.
Yeah.
That we have,
Yeah.
because to your point, by the time you're at high school level, trying to convince someone that they're good at math after 8 years of not feeling that they're good at math is it's probably not gonna happen at
right.
that point. The other thing that
I mean, the high school does a really good job, I've been amazed over the years.
they
but
try to get them.
It would be a whole lot
But
better.
it's, the whole point is kind
Yeah.
of like working back. I mean, I've been in different districts where if you want a better outcome at the end, you have to expand the pipeline in the
At the
beginning.
beginning,
Right.
yes.
Because it already kind of sits down. And there's plenty of research around, one of the most famous ones is Claude Steele's outcomes for students. Where he talks about study that they did at Stanford. This is even at the college level, where they went to stereotypes of people saying, people who look like you generally don't do well on this test.
Yeah,
And they perform to that expectation, as opposed to just saying, I think you can do really well on this test, and then they do fine.
right,
I would say the other thing, and this gets to, again, some of the questions that we have. Is that I know when I was an elementary principal, and even what we've seen sometimes in the building. Is some of the staff don't even feel comfortable with math.
Mhm.
So if they don't feel comfortable with math, that translates also back to the expectation level, like, I'm kind of uncomfortable with math. So students then pick up on that uncomfortableness. And we want them to feel comfortable in all those areas and to have the high expectations for students. But that again has hopefully the triangle, the three angles of the data, the student, staff, and the parents saying, yeah, my student, I get good conversations or my communications with my teacher, classroom teacher is, yeah, they have high expectations for my students and they're helping them with those high expectations. You can't just have the high expectations, you have to be able to have the support to help them like get along that way. So,
I'm smiling because when we visited a school at Cascade, that one of the teachers said, errors are a gift for learning. That's one of the norms in SFUSD. And to your point, the teacher said, when I was younger, math was about getting it right. And in SFUSD, it builds on the fact that if you don't get it right, it's a part of the learning. And then you have to ask questions until you make sense of what it is that you're being asked to do. So, yeah.
And I think to your point, lots of studies have shown that elementary teachers are least confident teaching math. When you ask them, like, rate how confident you are in all the subjects, if they teach all of them, math comes up the lowest every single time. And so if you are when you look at like teacher disillusionment or curriculum adoption, it's highest when you come to math, because you're asking them to use new materials for something they don't feel super confident in. And then to give up control to kids to learning, that's just a whole, that's a lot, but it
And we-
speaks to you want to build the confidence of every person.
Mhm.
And that starts with the person presenting the information, because if the teacher says to the kid, I believe in you, but the kid also sees they don't believe in themselves, like it doesn't work out as well.
And I think what's happened, particularly with math and in the new curriculum, the Common Core standards, we've shifted much more, the balance has shifted away from just regurgitating algorithms to understanding. And that requires a whole nother level of confidence in teachers to be able to do that. And so, and yeah, that's, I mean, it's why, for example, I mean, this is not just us statewide. Test scores went down when the SBA came in. And so we're trying to figure out how to change the system to, yeah, and we may, I mean, there's a whole, I mean, we've discussed some of it, I mean, whether it's coaching, whether it's having math specialists, I mean, there's a whole set of things that you could think about doing, but it's, yeah, there's gonna need to be some changes for sure.
And this is a conversation for a later time,
Yeah.
but in order for us to have some consistent professional development.
Yeah.
Weekly, monthly, we just need to think about that as a whole, in terms of what will that look like on our school calendar? How can we say that these things need to happen, but when will it happen if it's optional? And if it becomes a part of my day, if it becomes part of our day, then if we say every Friday from 1 to 3:30, there's going to be professional development on the areas that we have identified as a school district, not teaching and learning, not the CAO, but we've identified, then we can for sure say, we know that this is going to happen during this time. Bring student work, let's talk about it. Let's invite other schools, we can create that through line from the CEE data, the boardroom, the class, all the way through the classroom. Right now, it's a hope and a wish
Mhm.
that this will get done.
Mhm.
Well, and even is the, the Wednesday early release for, 2 to 3, is that the best way to do training? Or is it the just-in-time training, where coaches are monitoring in the class? I mean,
Yeah, I think it's
and there-
both
and
and.
there's- yeah, right. It
Mhm.
usually is. It's
Mhm.
usually some balance of the two.
Yeah.
Because I know when we were 5 years ago, we were doing technology, it was, everybody kind of generally agreed at the just in time.
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
teaching this lesson today, I want to use this technology,
And we-
send there or whatever, whatever it is to help train. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what's really effective,
Yeah.
as opposed to, going somewhere and sitting and forgetting about
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Have to use it 5 months later.
Later,
So anyway, that's another.
Yeah, I do think that there's an aspect here that we haven't quite hit on yet, and I think it's the piece. Well, there's a lot of information here in these reports, and there's a story here, and there's a heart to this story, and I think that if we are the community organization that does the teaching and learning in this sense, and if we have folks that are showing up at all different levels that do not believe that students can. If we do not have everyone on board believing that every student can learn and grow, meet standard, I think there's something there that we have to really unpack. And I know you talked about that piece before we can get to these other parts. Everybody here that shows up every day has to believe that every student walking can learn and grow. And to meet standard can be successful for these other pieces sticking together. And
Mhm.
yeah, I think that
I agree.
that's the why.
Mhm.
Why are we here? Because
And I haven't met a student yet at any level that I don't have that sense for, I know
right.
they're awesome. When you interact with our students at every single level, like they're pretty amazing people, so they can do a ton.
Isn't it also creating a learning environment at every aspect with staff, with that we're all learners?
Yes.
Teachers are learners. We model it, my kid went back to college with me twice. Guess what? She's a college professor. She loves learning. It was modeled for her. And it feels like when we slip over into the competence or into the standards, that we kind of lose that learning environment. We get more to a place where, yeah, I learned it, I'm done. So I just encourage us to continue to treat everybody as learners. Even our parents, how do we help our parents be learners also? So that then when they go home, they're modeling learning.
Thank you.
Can I just say a couple things? The time piece that we talked about, the professional development time and the time to have these conversations is really in short supply. So that's definitely one thing. That's a great conversation to have. And then as far as like those gap analysis that they present to us, those are very difficult conversations to have with staff from a building leader point of view, but they're very much worth all the work that goes into it, because I've seen some really good results there. And then Aaron and I bring the discipline data into the HOPE team conversations to try to move some of that work forward. So we are looking at that as well.
Mr. Baker, I'm so sad that I'm so grateful that you just said that about the component that it'll be hard to have those conversations, but it's really worth it. And I think that that's another thing that just kind of as a district culture, like we have an opportunity to really lean into that we haven't done super well. Is like, how are we really leaning into the hard stuff? Like we're so afraid of conflict. But like there's learning and beauty in conflicts. Like how can we really lean into those things? And the results can be really powerful, but it's hard. It's hard. So thank you so much for saying that.
I just wanted to point out, it was the last presentation, page 4, excuse me, for social support, and one of the items, I received training on instruction to support social and emotional learning, right? It goes up 2% from 2021 to 21-22, but then you see I incorporate social and emotional instruction into my daily instructional delivery, which goes down 8%. And then if you go above, I understand instructional strategies to support social and emotional learning objectives, and that plummets. So then they're saying, yes, thank you for this training, but even though I have this training, I still either don't understand how to incorporate, or I just don't do it in general. And so I think that is a whole nother conversation, since a lot of what we're starting to focus on, continue to focus on the social and emotional learning. Thank you for the training, but I still don't quite get it. I'm not quite doing it. And how does that help support our kids?
I wondered too, putting this in context about asking more questions, the fact that I don't know what time of year this survey was taken last school year, but the last school year was super hard, like for kids and families and teachers, because we were kind of sort of coming out of the pandemic and everything was really up in arms, like different. How are these results going to look this year with a more, I'm going to say typical like ish school year?
Right.
Like what is like, if we put this data in the historical context of where it sat in time for last year's numbers, specifically whether they're big jumps or big drops, like I wonder how that much of it may be an outlier given like the level of fatigue and kind of overwhelm that every person in all school systems is feeling.
So I kind of always like 2 years is not really a trend. I like to go much farther back in some of this data to see, because you're right, all kind of weird things happen during COVID. And so, but the other thing I was thinking, Veronica, when you talk about training, does the training sink in? And so to me, that kind of is that just in time concept of a coach. So you can sit down and have some training, But if you don't really get how to apply it in your classroom, then maybe you need, a coach or walk, academic leaders, principals walking through and providing that, coaching about, here's, you need to do this, this, and that, yeah.
But this is where we need really good job description of what coaches do. Because having gone through an era of the coaches really didn't have a job description. So they need to have a job description and they need to be able to understand how to present the information. And having worked with some coaches that didn't have that ability. I have reservations about coaches because of that. So if they don't have a good job description and they aren't understanding what their job entails, it's not gonna be fit.
So to your point, having a job description doesn't make you the coach.
No, not at all.
So there's also some it helps. But there's also some training and some certification in order for you to become a coach.
Right.
So we can take it that step further in that you need to have certification, you need to practice, and then, follow the job description. And the way I would envision coaching is that they may be funded 0.2 at the central office level, so that there is some practice here. Here is what we need to be focusing on based on what is coming out of the buildings. And then we go back and do those things, not just randomness. Right? There is a way that instructional coaches should show up. Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
thanks for sharing that.
the experience that we've had, it's kind of like everything. It depends on who does it.
Yeah.
You can do it really well and you can do it really poorly. And then how does the system kind of catch when it's not being done well
Yeah.
and correct it or, support a change or whatever, to fix it.
Yeah. Thank you. Great.
My favorite things about this conversation so far is because CE incorporates so many things we can talk about, so many different things. It's really nice. I wanted to just really quickly come back to the example that you just gave, Veronica, because I think that was such a beautiful example of like how we move away from like the checkbox type of approach to looking at this data and actually like, how do these connect to each other? And those are the types of things that I'm really grateful that you just brought that in. I want us to be doing more of that. And then the PD thing, I mean, as a facilitator in professional development, like we know that one-off trainings do not do anything, right? So the coaching model is really wonderful. And then I think there are also ways to consistently embed, right? So they're really building up each other and increasing opportunities to actually like practice or think about how they're going to implement. Like one of the problems that I think we run into is you have a 2-hour training, but you don't actually get the opportunity to ruminate and think about what that actually means in the context of your classroom, right? So even creating a professional learning team or whatever, or, they go to a training 1 week and then the next week they have that whole hour and a half to sit as a group together and say, great, what do we do with this information? Maybe there could even be the facilitator of that training there and really guide them and support them in thinking about that. So I think there's a lot of different ways to really think about doing professional development, but how we get it into our calendar, that's going to be the first one, right? Is figuring out how we make the time for that.
And then to your point, once we have that professional development, and that is, the teachers understand this is what we're doing as a result of the stuff that you all said you needed. When principals do walkthroughs, when teachers visit other classrooms to see how things are doing, we are focusing on the PD that we've had to see that the instructional strategies are being implemented. I can go in and learn something new, or if there's something that you're doing well, then another person can come in, or another grade level can come in, but we're working on the same strategies throughout the building.
Yeah, that's the other thing I'm a big fan of is the team. So if you get a grade level team and one member may be good at something, but if it's really humming, that team, they will help each other.
Exactly, yes.
And that's a
Yes.
very effective way, I think, of spreading, whatever
That
the
knowledge,
concept
yes.
is you're trying
Yes.
implement. So,
And that takes time to establish.
It does.
yeah, and that's, I mean, teachers are constantly, we want more kind of team playing time. But it does have to be kind of directed and focused on something that's gonna actually matter, but yeah.
But I think the elementary have that opportunity because they all have planning at the
Yeah,
same time.
right.
So perfect time to, and I think sometimes the teachers understand the rationale, just explain to them the whys, that makes such a difference with buy-in.
And I think going back to the comment that Aaron made earlier, kind of that really being at the heart, core, the center, right? How are we fostering a culture of being a learning organization? When that's literally what we are here to do. So I think that maybe warrants a conversation in and of itself of really like, I don't know, how do we collectively shift that? I don't know, but I know we can.
I think, I mean, Sarah's pointed that, focusing down on that question of why do so many people
Yeah.
feel like students are not capable, what? And we talked about that earlier. I mean, that's kind of to me, that's kind of a focus group thing, is to figure out, go and maybe we need a facility or whatever, get some representative and maybe a little tough. You want a representative groups of people who think students can and students can't. I'm not sure anybody necessarily will volunteer that one, but hopefully you can do that some way to really delve into, I mean, there could be some really valid reasons why they think that, but let's figure out what those reasons are, and then we can start to shift things.
And to your point, do we educate as though it is impossible to fail? Or do we say, oh, well, you can't do that, it's okay? Or do we say, no, where's that habit of mind where you gotta persevere? You gotta persevere. I'm gonna give you the scaffolds. I'm gonna give you the resources. I'm gonna give you the support. I'm gonna give you the praise. I'm gonna do all of those things. I'm gonna meet you where you are. And we're going to see incremental growth. Or do we just say, do we educate as though it is impossible to fail?
Dr. Bush, I think it's both, right? Because we have to be realistic with the situation. Just like how you said, we are going to do this. You're gonna be amazing. You're gonna be great. It's not gonna be easy. I will be there with you along that part of the reality, but we are gonna get there together. So we kind of do both, but not with a negative deficit, but as an empowering, realistic. The walk is gonna be hard, but we're gonna get there, and we're gonna be shouting on top of that mountain when we get there. Then I think that paints the picture of, I believe in you, you should believe in me, and we're gonna believe in we, because we're gonna do this collectively.
Which I think also gets to that part of being having that learning atmosphere, is that ability to fail. Sometimes we want that for our students to say, yeah, I don't expect you to be at this level in September, October. Like, you're not already at grade level. You just started third grade. You're not at third grade level right now. So this is, you're gonna build on that. But even if that it's also some of the growth that we've talked about of course, we want our students to be at their grade level, meeting all those goals, but it's the growth that they make along the year
How
that
do they feel about
says,
themselves?
right, absolutely, like,
Feeling it.
look, you're being successful, like, this is the mark, but you're making every day is a new stride to get you closer and closer to that piece. And that's what I'm hoping that we see, and that's what I would hope staff see too. Like, even if they feel like, I don't know if our students can do that, hopefully over time, that's what they start to feel is like, oh, see more and more of my students making this growth. So now I know they can do that. For some people, it's seen as believing, and for other people, believing and then seeing. So they believe in it already, and they help make it so that everybody else can see it. And other people just have the mindset that I have to see it first before I can believe it. And we know both of those, all those kinds of people exist within our system. So how do we have those conversations about, I know you're the kind of person who's seen as believing. How do we get you to kind of some of that? How do we get you to more of the believing part where we need to get to? So.
And there's a variety of different ways. So do robotics up in this kids class up in Cascade View. She's the computer learning labs person up there. if you walk into her class, she has all over the walls, these things about failure, kind of. Failure, no, we need to try it again, I mean, there's these, she translates all these things, and I watch the kids, and they, those are up there every day, and the kids see those things. And at the end of this, oh yeah, I'm kind of like that, but I could be like that.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there's all these little, signs that you can, your teachers can do to kind of convey that whole idea that, there will be failure, you will have to try, but
You can still
here's
get
how
there.
you deal with that. So anyway,
And that's how we need to show up every day.
Yeah.
You can do this. You can do this. And you're not, no one is born smart. We work at being smart. We work at, being successful, however successful is determined. But if you set this goal and this is where you want to be, then these are the things that you need to do to get there. So.
and we do need to, the other one, as I was saying, celebrating success, because there was some things in the CEA that we don't celebrate successes enough. And I think that's true. I know, when I was spotting these fifth grade science success like Cascade do, and I talked to some of the teachers, they had no idea that happened. So, I mean, yeah, I think we need to get better at celebrating our successes. Because sometimes it's, I mean, when test scores comes out, you can look at our test scores and sometimes they're great, but there are actually good things in there, which we need to celebrate.
So this kind of makes me wonder or think a little bit, and just kind of maybe something I'll kind of push back to everyone to reflect on and think a little bit, and maybe even develop a personal goal around, is like, how can we each, like within our individual roles, actually model the idea of being a continuous learner, right? Because of course, I think it starts from the top, right? So if I, as someone's supervisor, am not modeling what it is like to receive constructive feedback, to own my mistakes in front of them, to really model what it's like to, be a humble learner, then we're certainly not going to change the minds of teachers if they're not seeing that from us. So how can we each, within the individual capacities, really start to model that? Because I'm a firm believer that it is modeling and relationship based that changes culture, right? That's what changes culture.
Can I just ask that we go a step further
Please.
and have accountability partners?
Yes. Yes. So thinking about, what is that goal for you? And then, who would be a person that can hold you accountable for that? I might come to one of y'all, so.
Okay.
So, it is 10:23. How are folks feeling as far as the CEE conversation?
Really helpful.
Okay, is there any other kind of final clarity that anyone has of us, or anything that you feel like we didn't quite get?
So where do we go?
And where do we go from here is a good question for sure. Maybe we could just take a second and say where, kind of based on the conversation, what your thoughts are, maybe kind of first next steps for you. If that feels doable. Might not, I know you've got a lot, but.
I guess I would just like us to use this survey as a growing point, not looking at the deficits, but looking at where we are doing well and how can we expand on that and use this in a positive light rather than, oh my gosh, look over there. That would be my request.
Seems like the next step is kind of on the agenda for next Tuesday, where the elementary school will come in and say how they're using this data. So I think that's a good.
And then
step.
it's okay for them to look at the positive and comment on how they're gonna expand that.
Yeah, I'm always a big fan of, doing both, you know,
Yeah.
part of the ways to improve and you celebrate the good things of doing both.
So I want to manage expectations.
Mhm.
Because our school improvement plan is derived from our district improvement plan and our district strategic plan. And based on the conversations that we're having here, we're creating next steps. But our school improvement plans that the principals are going to be presenting is based on our district improvement plan as relates to academics, SEL, race, and equity. So I just want to manage that expectation, and they're going to be talking about how that section on change. This, and that's what we submitted. So if there are questions, it's gonna be helpful to send those questions ahead of time, like you do on Sundays, so that they can be prepared to answer additional questions.
I don't, so far in Word docs, I didn't see any material on what is it, the board work
It's-
session?
It was
which
there,
is-
it was there last night.
Oh, okay, maybe I didn't, maybe it came in after, I was looking at it yesterday, but maybe they're not.
I glanced at them, they look great. Okay, so I think, you know, that was working off of, I think, yeah, so
Okay.
whatever we hear on Tuesday, we're gonna hear and it's gonna be wonderful. It's
Okay.
gonna be what we need, what we want, and the principals are gonna be there and it's gonna be great. And then, you know, I think we continue, I think this is what I wanna do more
Yes.
often, so that the clarity can continue to come,
Yeah.
right? So, you know, this is, yes,
Thank you.
yes.
I think for me, when I see both on this and, you know, the other pieces to the point you made earlier, like there is a lot of information and data in here that should be informing things that we do and the prioritizations that we make around Potsdam. Because it does take time for people to fill out the survey. It does cost dollars for us to do the survey. So I think like many other things, they shouldn't be what I call shelf knowledge. Like you just get it, put it on a shelf, like, yep, we did the survey. Like the more you can reference back to it, people also get used to saying, let me go back and look at that data. Let me realize that there's 500 to 700 pages of data in here. Like there's a lot to be gained from looking at it, both the successes and the areas of improvement. So you can celebrate things and then also say, so we're a little bit off in this. How can I tie this to some of the school improvement goals that we have? Is improving this area gonna help out with this area? Or, you know, it seems like we're not making that connection with our students. How can we help do that? So for me, I think just more ways in which we see our references to this, not that it's always just about the data, but it's one of those backup points, like, here's what we're doing, and if you reference back to the CE data, like, this was a success for us, so this is why we're talking about it right now, graduation data. Students felt like they were represented, this is awesome. Or we have a new curriculum adoption, and part of that is because in our CE data, students said they didn't see themselves in this. So this was what was helping guiding us in while we're doing this curriculum adoption. So I think just us putting it more in our conversations and being exposed to that, I think will be.
And everything that they're doing is going to ultimately impact, whenever anybody takes the survey, it's gonna impact, I understand instructional strategies. Yeah, it's going to impact, the work that they are doing will definitely impact this when they take another survey.
I think the other items, just kind of going forward is, are there specific items that we want to track over time related to the strategic plan? There's references in there to some of them, but make them explicit and then make sure that we do in fact track them over time. And then the other one, I think to Aaron's point, can we actually delve into that issue of, you know, the staff believe to standard to the point I mean, we need to poke in and how you decide to do that, folks, with whatever, but I think we need to understand that one a lot more, you know, what exactly why did they say that they didn't feel students?
And maybe we need to make more of an endeavor to re-believe the staff. I don't think we do that enough. So,
Well, first question for me is just, you know, why, you know, because that's a fairly bold statement. We don't think students can. And so, and I have no idea, I really don't know why somebody is saying, and there's probably multiple reasons why, but it kind of cries out for getting down and figuring out what are those reasons, and then go from there.
And to your point, some of the whys may not necessarily be them as a person, it might be the tools that they
Yeah,
don't
exactly,
have, right? Like,
exactly.
oh, the curriculum people,
Yeah.
whatever the case may be, so
Right,
just,
right.
again, asking those additional
Right.
questions to try to see.
or
Right.
maybe because they're not successful themselves and they kind of project that. So that's why I feel we need to make sure the staff is feeling supported and that we have faith of them too.
Well, I mean, there's enough questions in here indicating that in various places, they're not feeling supported in various ways, and so that is what we need to understand exactly what those ways
Yeah.
are.
Want to make just a super quick note about the demographics. I've said this once or twice, but I'm really hoping we connect with CE and work on this. I would love to not see other under gender anymore, and if we're having students select other, it's very othering. So I'd love to, you know, work with CE to at least get genderqueer, non-binary, some other option trans on there, rather than other. And then, I guess I'm confused about some of the things that are listed under ethnicity. And so I'm a little bit confused about if they're blurring the definitions of ethnicity and race. Because for instance, white is a race, not an ethnicity. Black is a race, not an ethnicity. So I'm just curious if, and then there are certainly not all ethnicities represented there. So if we could expand, perhaps maybe break it out, race, ethnicity, I'm not sure what CE has the ability to do. But that just seems strange to me. I don't know if that was.
We're working with CEE. What's good about that is it's not like the state that has certain
Right,
categories that have to span like every school district. So we have much more control over how we can get demographic.
okay,
So
so
we
maybe,
can certainly.
perfect, awesome. Cool.
So if you have suggestions about some of those, I mean, we can look at the race ethnicity, but when it comes to identity, gender identity.
Sure.
If you want to give us some suggestions about different boxes, we can look at that too, to ask them like, what's the most expansive number of boxes you have from a district? We'd love it, and then we could also offer this.
Some of the time, things with identity too, I think can be useful is not making them multiple choice, but making like you can multi-select, right? So then I could select genderqueer, I could select trans, right? So it could be both. That's actually reflective, and that's particularly true, I think, if we're meant same with race, exactly. So many of our students, right, have, you know, multiple races, ethnicities, and things like that. So I think the most that we can capture in a way that is actually authentic. So if there could be that multi-select option, I think that's always best.
Okay, so, and again, managing expectations, when we have our school,
They won't be there, but that's okay.
no, it's gonna say gender X because they're pulling it,
And I did
Well-
see that, and I actually would prefer that than
Okay.
other.
Yeah.
okay.
That's better, but still particularly something that someone fills out, they shouldn't have to select other.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, how would folks feel if we just took a 5-minute break and sing happy birthday? Okay, we'll take a quick break, do whatever. Actually, we'll make it 7 minutes and come back at it even 10:40.
Okay.
Let's make it an even.
Even 10:40. All right, welcome back. Sorry that we extended that just a little bit longer, Mr. Baker. All right, so we're gonna jump to the LAP High Poverty Grant.
Right. Yeah, you can just, I'm just trying to see what you're gonna pull up there. Actually, can you pull up the PowerPoint?
Yep, perfect. All right, so Dr. Borshade and myself have worked on the high poverty for you guys. And so the first slide, we want to obviously in everything that we do, we want to incorporate our strategic goal, right? So here, learning starts, right? So with high poverty, all educational services provided to students in Tupelo School District supports the notion that here is where learning starts. We use data to help identify the type of funding that will be used to assist our students in experiencing success. For example, the Lap High Poverty Grant provides supplemental instruction and services to students who are not meeting academic standards in basic skill areas such as reading, writing, and mathematics, as well as reading associated with these skills, as identified by statewide school or district assessments or other performance measuring tools. And so we just wanted to kind of encompass how our Lap High Poverty ties in to our strategic goal with our here. And so the next slide talks about, on the left-hand side is the revenue that we received for 21-22. And then our budget for 22-23. And on the right-hand side are our actual expenditures for 21-22, and then our budget for 22-23. And as you can see, I know that in previous board meetings, I was very direct and intentional about recoveries, right? Because I know in the past we had recoveries, but I tried the best that I could for the 21-22 school year, and some unforeseen things such as orders being or items being ordered and not meeting the deadline as far as being received and paid, we were not able to charge those items to High Lap Poverty for that prior year. And so we will have a recovery for the 22-23 school year. But with that being said, Dr. Borshade and myself are working really hard, as you will see in the next slide, with the plans and being very intentional on how the dollars can be spent and what that looks like in each individual building.
Would you prefer questions to wait till later?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Can you just give me an example of like an item that wasn't received, that we got too late?
Yes, I believe it was at Thorndike Elementary, and I believe it was for some social and emotional materials.
Okay.
And some of the pieces there that some of you may or may not be aware, we have had a lot of turnover. And one of the pieces for Thorndike specifically was that the principal had been out and they had a new office manager. And we had to borrow an office manager from another school to kind of step in, get all the feedback from the teachers and get these items ordered. So it was a heavy workload. We tried our best, and that's kind of
Cool. I just wanted to, so when you say items, it's like literally like tangible
Tangible,
items. Okay. And then just to kind of, so it would be like, maybe they ordered it in, I'm just throwing out things, maybe they ordered it in August. And so if it had come in August, we could have coded it to here, but because it came too late. Right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Just wanted to make
it's
sure.
about the correct,
my
the
layman's terms
order.
I could understand.
Yep, the items, when they are received, and then even if, like, let's say if they got received in August, right? Like, I try to keep the books open long enough to try to capture everything in the current year, especially the categoricals that have these type of implementations, like last minute, like October, like, but it
Why is it received instead of like paid for? That's so weird. Or does it not get paid for until it's received?
we pay for it after the items are received.
Okay,
So we encumber
Okay.
it in the budget,
Got
meaning
it.
the money's spent, but you
Right.
can't actually charge it to the budget
Okay.
until you receive it.
okay. So it's not like an order that something you'd order from Amazon where you pay for it when you order
That's
it.
right.
It's a thing that you get and then you get an invoice and pay
Yep.
it then. Okay, thanks. Helpful. Sorry.
Can you just talk really briefly, you were talking on this thing, so what are some of the allowable things you can spend things on in high poverty?
Perfect. So one of the things that we got feedback from some of, well, first, because of some of the principals being new and the majority of the office managers being new, I sent out a handy dandy what you can do with Lap High Poverty dollar documents, because the question is, how can I spend this? What does this look like? And OSPI has a great tool. I will just give high surface bucket items, right? So you can do this on coaching, family engagement, which I think is very important, as we just had the conversation with CEE data. How can we bring our parents and community into these conversations for our students that receive these services? So there's dollars that can be spent on that, graduation assistance for 11th and 12th graders, mentors for students who receive lab services, professional learning. How do we keep our our staff trained and up to date with professional learning around these subject areas, Saturday school, which the high school did implement last year, summer reading programs, summer school, transitional services for our 8th and 9th graders, transitional kindergarten, tutoring before and after school, tutoring during the school. And so these are, in working in partnership with Dr. Borshay, kind of giving, instead of just handing this document, which to me is straightforward, it's great. Sometimes people need a different visual. And so manipulating this form and sending it out to everybody and say, hey, this is how you can spend your dollars. And here is the expectation. And let's talk about the plan and see how it relates to your students and how they're doing, right? Because I know that one of the main areas is all about data and growth. How can we capture that growth? How are we using our dollars? And how is that direct impact to students? How can we see that from a visual standpoint outside of the feel good, like, oh, you know, I did tutoring and I feel good about it. That's great, but can we see the data associated with that tutoring? Did we do any type of growth? And so trying to encompass all those things together, identify our students, based on the identification, what needs do they have? And then having the measuring tools to say that this was in fact successful.
So do we have the issue of if we get down toward the end of the year and we see that maybe such and such isn't coming in, these materials aren't coming in, I wonder if we have a mechanism to kind of spot that and say, oh, can we shift these dollars to some, you know, somewhere else where we know we can spend it? You know, is there a mechanism like that built into the system, or could we build it into this year?
Yes, but to be very honest with you, Dave, it's not a good look to have recovery. I take stuff like that very personal, right?
Yeah, no,
So
I know,
that's
but-
what we do that last minute, we're not doing that no more. So I guess that's what I'm trying to say, having that plan up front, right? And making sure that by February,
Okay, yeah,
where are we
yeah,
at, so that we don't
Right.
have
Right.
those, but
Yeah,
if
that's what I'm
if
looking
it
for.
came down to it, absolutely, like,
Yeah,
I
no.
don't think we're gonna, let's call the vendor, let's make sure.
Yeah.
If not, we're gonna move this to the next year, and then how can we use those support services, but that last minute stuff, we can't.
Yeah, no, I'm just looking for a mechanism, like you say, in February, let's evaluate where we are in February, and if it looks like, you know, it's not gonna come or whatever, then we can shift it to somewhere else.
Absolutely.
And you can see in there, sometimes the expectation, as was alluded to, it can be spent on summer school. So you can have a budget for summer school, and it might come in under budget, which means then those dollars that were allocated for summer school, now you're in August and you've got dollars left over. So it's like, shoot, how do we spend this real quick? Then you're in the same spot. So that's what can be kind of a challenge about those. You are thinking or budgeting, this is when I'm going to expend it, and you can even have that as part of your plan, like in the summer, we're going to do this. But then let's say you have that change of new principal, new office manager. Now that expectation to follow through could be kind of lost in the gaps, which is why we don't want that. Obviously, we don't want that to happen. So yes, we want to make sure that there. So I guess part of that is a redundancy to say, this is the plan for that building. Okay, now that principal's out, let's just make sure that that plan can still happen. That's one of the supports we can get from the central office side, which we would need to do.
Just making sure that by February, 80% of the funds are encumbered. 80%.
Right, but again, I mean, you could even encumber it to say, we're gonna spend it in the summer, but then if you come in under budget, you still might find yourself in that spot. Because encumbering just means we have a plan for it. We don't have a delivery on it yet. But to that point, we have lots of other different pots of money that we might be able to shift to say, let's make sure we spend the flat high poverty. So yes, those are all yes ands, and if you can go back to that second page, which shows the allocation, can you just talk very quickly about how the allocations are determined?
Oh, the allocation is determined off of our free and reduced lunch percentage. And so each school gets an allocation based on the total enrollment and how many students qualify for free and reduced.
But that's an allocation, doesn't tie us to that, correct?
We have
I mean,
to at least,
if, you know, one school, you know, ordered something and it wasn't gonna come, could we then shift it to something else that we knew we could get at another school?
I'm sorry, ask that question.
So, you know, these numbers that you have per school, that's, as you say, tied to their free and reduced lunch
Yes.
percentage. But if we kind of catch early that maybe Cascade View isn't gonna be able to spend all theirs because they can't, you know, deliver, could we then shift it to something at Tukwila that they know they could get?
That is a really good question. I would actually have to see about that, but I know that this is what's earmarked for these buildings,
Yeah.
just kind of like.
Whenever I hear the word allocation at the state level, what my understanding of that word allocation, it always means, you know, that's where it goes allocated, but districts have the ability to move that around.
Let me get back to you about that, because I've just been working in the parameters of what the schools
Yeah.
are allotted for the most
Yeah,
part, because
and that's
it's part of
fine.
that too, is that we
Yeah.
haven't expended it.
Yeah, I
Anyway,
guess the other question I had was, this Laugh High Poverty, does that have any carryover at all?
10%,
Oh, it does have 10%.
it does.
Okay,
But I want,
the regular Laugh has the same.
I believe it's 10% as well.
Okay, so, but
And
in this,
handy
in this
dandy
case, we came up over that 10%. So we have to give it back.
And in the past, we
Okay.
have, especially during COVID, because it was very difficult to
Yeah.
spend some of the high, and, we had made a request to OSBI to get 100% carry. We weren't the only ones that
Yeah.
struggled with that.
Right.
And they were like, no, sorry, we're sticking at 10%. And part of that is because the state benefits by us, by districts not being able to do that, so it goes back to the state. So it's unfortunate because we thought, are you kidding me? This pandemic, like this is an extreme circumstance. We should be able to do 100% carryover. But they're like, sorry, we're capping it at 10. We're sticking. But we obviously don't want to do that kind of recovery. Like that's a big chunk and money that we could expend. So, but I do understand the thought, the other piece though, that I guess we would want to make sure when we go through our financial audit, because we do that every year, is that it doesn't look like we're taking money from one school
yeah.
to expend more at another school,
Yeah.
because then it could be like, well, so CV was supposed to have this much,
Mhm.
how come you only did half of it there?
Mhm.
Where clearly we're spending, and you still have to account that it's being spent on the students who qualify.
Yeah,
So, I mean, if we had that one up to say, well, we were coming up a little bit short, I think if it didn't look like that every year, that probably might look okay, but if every year, like, once, but then that, we should be working with that principal in that building to say, hey, you need to be
What's going on
expecting your
here?
dollars
Yeah.
better.
and as long as we have now a mechanism in place that February, we can spot this stuff and take care of it earlier, then that's good.
I'm just. Okay, go ahead. I'm just thinking, yeah, as a building principal, some of the things that I did with my carryover, because I was trying to build up enough for something else
Mhm.
in the next school year, and if I know that it's gonna be taken, that just wouldn't feel good.
Right, and I think part of this too, in just prior years, is just really explaining to the principals like what this means and how important
It is.
this is. Because I had a conversation with one, and the conversation was, it's not a priority right now, I have to work on this, I'll get back to you. And then I'm like, "Uh-oh." But we don't understand the implications behind it, like, this is really, really important, but, you know, I can only do so much. But with that being said, again, it's the why and the implications of the whole program as a whole.
Can you just give the acronym MSOC for folks?
Oh, material supplies and other costs. So that's everything unrelated to people and benefits.
And is that set at a certain percentage of their grant?
No, not for,
That's just how they decided to allocate their.
correct. The only school that has a person tied to Lehigh poverty is Showalter Middle School, and it's their social and emotional interventionist. I think that's the correct term. Everybody else is you know, extra hours or team read or some summer school extra hours, things of that nature. So any questions?
What is no reading?
No red ink. I believe that is the online grammar
Yeah.
software.
What is that?
Like, I think, what, like, if the students submit, you know what, I don't want to
Oh.
misspeak, but I feel like in my, because I knew the
You
question
said
was gonna
writing,
come up, but I
then.
think, yeah, you submit. I try to be proactive with some of this, because when I looked at it, I was like, they're gonna ask me questions, let me guys find out. Right, but
The
I,
English department, they use it for, it is, so it's not online for them.
Correct grammar, yeah. Oh, that's, okay, now I get the name.
No, ready.
Yeah.
PTSD.
Yep.
You guys are laughing, I'm. All right, okay, so what I have on the left-hand side is how, Showalter spent their, allocation last year, and then the plans moving forward in, 22-23 with the continued service, and then what is new for, 22-23. And as we move through the year, some of this, may change depending on, conversation, or if the needs of the students shift, or we want to look from a different standpoint. I know Dr. Forshey is working really closely with the building principals around budget and all that stuff. And so if things change, basically I'm just saying not that so things may look a little different as we go through the year. And one of the things that are new at Showalter this year, is the communities in school renting. Last year it was in the 3 elementaries, but this year they're supporting the school.
And that's a kind of, we contribute money, they contribute some themselves.
That is correct, yes.
They got, if you didn't hear, they got a massive
Yeah.
grant.
Pay those.
Yeah. Yeah, she donated something like $150 million to
Yeah.
communities and schools.
So will the elementary also, or just?
Correct. No, it's still, yeah,
They're still-
they're still there. It's just, we are now,
Expanding.
utilizing the services.
Okay.
It's pretty much the same thing with the elementary schools. What we are continuing moving forward, and then, new expenses for this year.
A little bit of a random question, I guess, and I guess pick one, could be the no red line, or that could be mind map renewal, but whatever. Are those typically like we pay per student that engages with it, or do we just pay for like a license to be able to send as many students that want to utilize that service, or is it like it depends?
I think it depends, because there's some that I've seen that are very specific to 5 classrooms or 130 licenses.
Okay.
Or 80. So I think it just depends on
The
school
particular
and the
service
plan.
as well, okay.
Interesting, I see Thorndike and Cascadia are using ST Math. That's been around in this district for a long time, and I've never seen any data as to, is it working? You know, seems like it'd be nice to have some. I mean, I've seen it, it's a really interesting program, but whether it's producing results, I don't know. And I see we're paying for it.
You can see also between the buildings, it's always fascinating to me, like what they're spending their money on and how much is going into the MSOCs compared to their allocation. Which, I mean, all of those things are important. The MSOCs can be really impactful depending on who they are.
Do the elementary principals have an opportunity to talk amongst each other about it?
They will.
I think in the past, they probably had their conversations about how they might be spending some of their money. There are some, like you were saying, the ST math is something that they would talk about. And before, I mean, you had obviously a range of experiences. Now you have two principals who are brand new. So this is the first year there, which is why you probably see a lot of continuing, because they're just like, well, right now the plan is to continue.
Yeah.
But I think as they get a handle throughout the year about what they think and have conversations with their staff about. So I've got this good pot of money. I mean, these are pretty good sized budgets for them to be able to figure out ways to support their buildings, students, staff and family. They then will probably think about next year. And so that's why I think going through to February, that February timeline, okay, how are you planning on expending this? Again, we don't want to get caught in a place of recovery, but also thinking about the things combined with like ESSER and other things that we can start in the spring or the summer and then continue for the next year. It's like trying to pool all those resources together.
And I think there's something to be said about having some continuity with programs between the elementaries, but it's also something to be said about individualizing the character development.
Needs at the school, yeah.
Fine line.
Could money be used, you mentioned the community engagement component. Could that translate into translators or interpreters for community engagement events?
If it is related to the reading, writing,
Okay.
social emotional
Okay.
support. Yes, I mean, even in here, like you can literally pay somebody to watch the kids while the parents learn, right? Like if you brought in an outside organization to watch the kids while the parents learn.
Oh my
you can
gosh,
pay for
can we do
as
that?
well.
That's amazing. Like, I just think about like, that might be some, for lack of a better word, like low hanging fruit to really utilize, because you mentioned that we haven't really like gotten this money at its fullest. That's not the word you use, but like, how can we find small opportunities to really increase the ways in which we're spending this money at these really small, tangible ways, like offering childcare? I think that would be super cool. Yeah. But they could be maybe supported by the district level too.
Oh, it's at the Deb, it's at I think it's the first or second slide. And it's to the right-hand side. Keep going. I think it's that one. It's dark. Can you click it? It highlights. Is that do you know, further to your right, is it linked?
There was a
Oh, why
hyperlink.
did that? Should have been a hyperlink.
There was a-
Okay, I think you still had it up on one of your other tabs. Yep, I think it's that one.
What?
You scrolled at the bottom, it's that spreadsheet.
Oh,
So there you
That-
go.
Yes, okay. So this is, what we're using in teaching and learning to show what is being spent each month.
So that's for this year, 20.
Yes.
22, yeah.
Yes, and so if we go down, and click on the roll for licensing,
what?
the roll for licensing, 7,300. Keep going down, yes, keep going, row 15,
Oh.
all the way over. And if you hover over that, it tells us what they are using it for. So each month, so then by the time we get to February, we should be 80% of the way there. Okay. That's the way we are tracking, and then same thing with all of the buildings.
So this will help in multiple ways. So what I appreciate is, one, I mean, continuing to build that connection between departments to kind of the visibility and accountability around the programs. So that then when we're reporting out, creating that, we've got information that we can tell you that this is how it's being spent. This is what we're hoping really connects and is bringing about some of the change that we're trying to invest in.
Yeah, that's the other part of it is, I'd like to know whatever evidence exists that, which of all this stuff is working, making any difference. And particularly I'm interested in, some of the stuff may be working, but if we could spend 2 or 3 times as much in that area, then we could get to, you know. Because this whole area of LAP, this is one of my focus areas for the funding system, because at the state level, funding for LAP is completely inadequate. I mean, it's like 10% more. So I'm always looking for evidence to say, okay, if we got, you know, 2 or 3 times this amount of money, or even, you know, the person I'm working with at the University of Washington claims it could be 10 times the amount. What would we do with it to produce, you know, superior results? And so the more you can point to, well, yeah, we spent the limited amount we have on this and this and this, and we got, you know, this kind of incremental results, but if we had 2 or 3 times as much, then, you know, that kind of stuff I'm always looking for.
And I think this is what we're hoping to have for each of the grants that we have. So kind of to
Yeah.
your point, we make investments in things, either professional development or items or curriculum, or people. The challenge though can be, we've thrown 5 resources at this challenge. Which one is the most effective? And it could be that, even though we're not spending a lot of money, so if I look at this, like, it could be that the licenses, while not a massive impact, are allowing a smaller group of students to be more successful. So it might not need to be 2, 3, 5 times the investment, because we know that this is a supplemental piece for maybe students who are 3 grade levels behind, and we only have X number of students who are 3 grade levels behind, but we found out that this was a good investment for that. But again, that implies a lot of connections that we're able to know exactly what that investment is and how it pays off for us and supports our students. And, you know, we can be visible about what that is.
Because I'm not sure very good, like I say, SU Math has been around for 6 or 7 or 8 years, and you know, I still have not, I don't know whether it's doing anything or not. I mean, we're paying for it, but you know, there's always the question, is it being used? Is it being used with fidelity? Is anybody measuring, you know, who's using it or who's not using it and what the differences are? I mean, it's still, and I assume some of these other things may be similar. I don't know.
I think it goes back to our CEE data, in that I don't necessarily think it's the program, it's how we are implementing it.
Yeah,
And, you know, making sure that our students understand how to use it.
right.
So
Right.
we have the training, we have the tools. Okay, so now are we making sure that we have an impact with what we're doing?
Right.
So just following that through line.
And I think the expectation, right, like, hey, this is the work that you're doing,
Doing.
here are the tools, here's the resources, here are the students. We need to know whatever you're using, does it have that impact? And I don't know if necessarily our teachers or intervention are aware of that, right? They're just, we're doing what we've been doing, right? So the kids log on, but it may have never been the expectation, like, hey, there's a report that you can run for each kid. Let's see what that looks like, right? Let's look at the data around the work that's being done in some of these softwares. So again, I don't know if it just the expectation, just that whole package of what the expectations
And
are.
what is STMAP in support of? As a student, I have my general math class, or is it in place of my math class? So those are some things that I need to become familiar with as well.
I was just gonna add, I do have knowledge of that, those conversations that are happening at the building, because I talk to principals in collaboration with the math and reading interventionists about, because they're actively choosing to continue another year with the program, you know, and it's because it's in response to, hey, something's working. So I think there is something there, but I know that interventionists in particular are talking to principals and making a decision to either go forward with the program or not.
Yeah, and visiting the classroom, you know, and in talking with the student, they can say, I'm doing this. And the question after this is, and how does that connect to what you're doing in your general math class? Because if it's a standalone, then we need to make sure we bridge that gap. because it then feeds into, okay, so when you get to the high school, if you are starting that far below, because STMAP is an intervention program, and if you're starting that far below, what do we need to do to shore you up? In addition, if you're taking STMAP and then you are a multilingual learner, there are some other things that we are unpacking and uncovering that we just want to make sure that you are set up for success in that space.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question is which, and we have such a variety of different students.
Mhm.
A program may be working well for MLL students,
Mhm.
it may be working well for, and then we're gonna have a discussion, I guess, in this thing about summer school. I'm really interested in, I mean, the general statement was really that summer school didn't do any good, but it didn't break it down to, you know, ELL students, special ed students,
Mhm.
students that came, actually, I know we have big absence problems,
Mhm.
you know, so, I mean, a lot of stuff we need to break it down into which set of, I mean, it may be working for a particular set of students, which is great,
Yeah,
and then, but, you know, so.
okay.
Quick question on the sheet here. Deb, would you mind scrolling down just a little bit? The negative balance in Showalter, can you just talk a little bit about that?
Like,
Up just a tiny bit more. Oh, yeah, thank you. There you go. Just line 45, yeah.
Negative one. Line 45.
Yeah, I was just.
Okay.
I know that sounds like a weird, okay. I would have to look at it, but another piece of this is that a lot of our carryover happens in January, so more than likely this may be shifted or allocated differently.
Okay.
Meaning that another school may have, I don't know, a positive 50, which I can move down because it's regular lap and not high lap. If that makes sense.
Not really, but that's okay.
meaning that one of the questions that Director Larson asked, can we take lap high poverty? And if a school doesn't use it all, can we shift it to another one? You can only do that with lap.
Okay,
So in this case where you see the negative 103, because it's in lap.
you
then
could do
another-
that.
Yeah, another
I
school,
see.
right, and so the carryover will come, and then she'll be able to.
So does that, if you go back to the other spreadsheet, Cheryl, I mean, it looks like that 537 is exceeding.
Oh.
I laugh for Showalter to begin with. I don't see their budget being that high.
It's different. So this is just our regular standalone lab.
Right.
And
Yeah,
so
that's what I was-
our higher allocations are the middle school and the high school.
Because they have more students, yeah.
So is that then, is the number one, if you go to the top, the allocations
This is just
keep
high
going
pop,
up?
this is just high pop.
Next one, right there. So that's high poverty lab and not a
And-
combination of high poverty lab and lab?
Correct, this is just.
Okay.
This is just high.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
so
Yes.
then you have the same breakdown for lab then as well.
Not, I can,
Because those are two different grants.
Yes,
Lab only,
correct.
and
Yeah,
then
not
lab
high
high
pop,
poverty.
yes,
Yeah. I
and
think
the
that would
question
be-
that you ask is from lap, but this is high pop.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, that's why I was like, I saw that. I'm like, wait a minute, that part, that 5 something part, to application. No wonder they're.
Yeah, the other funny, like, constant play with the state. Lap by poverty, so they have this 50% bar, which. So if you got 49, you get nothing, if you got 51%,
Right.
which is totally bizarre. I've been trying to lobby for a graduated scale, so that, you know, schools with, you know, 70–80% poverty. Would get more, but anyway. This whole lap funding system is kind of bizarre to begin with.
What funding system isn't bizarre?
It's a nice way to.
So Dave, have you heard much just from the legislative level? Just because I know you haven't gained and hear a lot of those people. have you heard about any changes from the state, either around parameters or allocations related to either of these
No,
pieces?
no, that's a multi-year project to
Yeah.
get them to move on any of the stuff, so.
And you've been also here, on the board the longest. How have you seen this change over the years, or have you seen it change?
Well, the legislature,
Since you first.
what do you mean, the legislature added the lab high poverty, that many years ago. So it used to be just lab and, yeah, that hasn't changed, that. The way they calculate lab is so many extra hours, blah, 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 it comes out to about 10% more per student, which is not what any research says you need to actually level the playing field for students coming from low income backgrounds. But anyway, that's the way they do it. So, but yeah, it hasn't really changed much, and I don't. Yeah, it's a long project to try and build up some support to actually improve this program, but.
It's interesting just from the regional basis. So the superintendent's working through law. So usually in each region have legislative priorities, just like laws that works through kind of each association as they kind of lobby legislators to this. This isn't one of those areas either, right now it's special education.
Yeah.
It's simple majority on capital items, bonds is what they're trying to move towards. Concerns around regionalization and salary implementation, that's a big one. But what's fascinating about this, as you've alluded to in the past, anytime you start talking about equitable distribution of resources, the school districts that are not high poverty don't really weigh into this conversation, or they exit from the conversation. There's like, no, it's not really affecting us. So it's
They
difficult.
actively oppose.
Well, in
Behind the scenes.
yeah, sure. In some cases they would. But the irony is, this also doesn't break down to like a red versus blue political spectrum, because a lot of the rural districts have high poverty.
Yeah,
So you would almost think that the approach to this
Yeah.
would equal out a little bit more, but it seems like whenever there's a conversation about funding and equity, people assume that there's also a racial element to it, which certainly there are some aspects to that. But really, poverty exists in lots of our communities. So it's almost like it seems like you should be able to get more momentum behind that allocation. And I don't know what gets lost. You've probably heard more, but I'm just curious, like how that doesn't translate.
yeah, the reason I've explored this quite a bit for you, and we are trying to assemble a coalition which would include the rural districts, because there's a lot of them, but when I talk to people in Eastern Washington, the people on the boards over there and so forth are pretty red, even though they're students. They're doing things that are not beneficial for their students. I've talked to a number of people who worked over in that area, and that's why. I mean, Eastern Washington is very red,
Right.
and so that's why they don't.
But it's also like this is poverty. I mean,
I know.
your district has high poverty.
Exactly,
It benefits. you to
Caste,
make the argument.
Class and cast.
It's pretty,
It's,
it is.
it's so, yeah, it is interesting to me that like, even if it could be beneficial for your district
Right,
and your family, it's,
that's
they,
our,
they would almost rather not have the resources, because then that means they would have to spend them
right.
in the way to benefits.
it's the
Right.
zero sum mindset,
Mhm.
right? That are so much of our structures are designed around, and we're
Yeah.
just ingrained to think that way when it's just.
And it's
No.
interesting, I mean, it shows that they're in this meeting, but if you look across the country, there's basically two fundamental funding systems. One is student-based and one is resource or staff-based. Ours is resource or staff-based, which is the minority of, and it's why, we have in our the huge achievement gaps in our state versus other states, and because we're one of the few that doesn't fund it in a student-centered mode. So anyway, yeah,
Interesting.
I'll show that graph at the next board meeting.
Which is also why expending for us, we want to make sure we're spending all of our high poverty dollars to show. I mean, it's hard for. It can work against us to say we need more money in this if we're.
But we're not
getting
even
money
spending all the
back.
money that
If
we're given,
getting
yeah,
recovered. So we want to make sure we're spending that, and we want to make sure that that's why that message gets down to the building level. We want to help them to make sure that they can expend it, because it's hard, you know, you go to legislators and it's like, hey, we need more money. And they're like, what'd you do with it last time? Oh, well, the state recovered some of this. And like, well, I mean, it's hard for me to advocate for more money when you're not spending all the money that we're giving you right now. And sometimes it's not because we couldn't use it in other areas. We need to demonstrate it too.
yes.
That's right.
Will empower our argument.
Yep.
To say that we need more, or in a different way. It's easier for, I mean. The costs that we have, I think, also are just different. So I think finding those parameters that we think will. Impact or expend the really. And support the pieces that we have. Almost when I think about like special education, the students who need really high impactful or high costly. Supports. Like that's how we're in the deficit on special education pieces, but that's what the students need. I mean, ultimately, that's some of the argument for the increase in special education. Now it's like it should be capped, it should be whatever the students need. So for us, we need to demonstrate that too and say, well, this is what our students need. And this is a mechanism, but we need more to show that impact, but we also need to show.
And I think there are some mechanisms, like we were talking about co-teaching. That's why I went to church school and they're very effective at using, so, and I've talked for years, and talking with teachers, we need more adults in the classroom and more certificated staff in the classroom. And so,
And more that look like our students.
yeah, exactly. And so, that can be very costly, but if we could do that, I mean, if we had, 10 times the lab, then we could have, and all of a sudden you've taken the class size down, because that's the other thing I've heard from teachers over there, particularly for our demographic, we have such a diverse group that just to have one teacher there is just not enough. And so anyway.
Thank you for this report. This was like really, really helpful for me in understanding kind of the landscape of the grant. This is really what I think I definitely hope for kind of going in. So thank you for just the detail on the and kind of laying out like just all this is really great. And the conversation was great around it too. So anything else around this? Okay, so it is 11:28. We're actually gonna jump to the flag salute discussion, and then we may have a tiny bit of time to talk about board priorities, but we're actually, considering we don't have one of our board members present, we might just kind of shift that to January a little bit. And I also think that, there are a lot of discussions that I think happened today and are gonna be happening, recently that I think will continue to inform the discussion on board priorities. So, and really the intent to that board priorities was to make sure that we're getting more and more collectively on the same page, so that when we're coming, with things to individual folks, there's an understanding that like we have a shared set of, these are our shared priorities. So anyway, just want to, make it clearer for everyone and ourselves, because we all have, of course, different, drivers and passions. And so how we can each connect those to really our shared vision of things. So anyway, flag salute discussion. So,
You're gonna table that?
oh, I have to actually officially table it. Okay, so I'm gonna motion to table that particular topic till January.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, great. It is tabled. So thank you for the reminder of process. Okay, so the flag salute discussion. I kind of just wanted to have a little bit of open dialogue about that component of the agenda, particularly thinking about the, the historical and systemic impacts, and, around the words that are even, that you have to speak as a part of that Flex Salute. And I know, I haven't been in as many classrooms as I would like all the time, but the times when I visited in the morning, I don't see kids doing that, and I'm not surprised. I don't particularly feel super compelled to pledge my allegiance to a flag. Particularly, I think there's so much nuance within, the words of the things so anyway, I just kind of want to have a little bit of open dialogue about how we can, as a governing body, be both honoring, our country, and also recognizing that there's just so much harm still occur. I don't know. I'm not speaking eloquently at all. What thoughts do
We've got
folks have?
enough information.
So there is an RCW, the flag salute is supposed to be given every day at school.
At school, yes.
That's an RCW. So that's not an option for us not to do that. And I'm not always in at the beginning of the schools when I do that, but I have heard it usually it's over the loudspeaker as an announcement to begin the day. I think it can be inconsistent because I didn't hear it at Foster when we were there the other day. But I have heard it at some of the elementaries.
Let me kind of restate. I heard it. Most kids did not participate.
Sure, and
That
that's
was
kind
one.
of it, yeah, and I think that there's been enough latitude for people to say,
Absolutely.
you don't have to stand and salute the flag. So individuals always have their option to do that. For all the different districts I've been in, it's always been a part of the school board meetings as well. And I think part of that is because it is that requirement within the schools. So we're trying to, they usually try and be consistent about that happening kind of systemically. So I know I talked to the PSCSD about that just to kind of get a perspective to see if it's something that needs to happen in all events. I know, the beginning of sport activities, they always do either a national anthem or a pledge of allegiance or whatever it may be. And it was interesting because their perspective on it was, no one's ever asked us that question before about board meetings because it happens, it's a part of every agenda piece, so. Yeah, well, and I think that's fine. I can understand that as well. My perspective on it is that I think, as you're mentioning, I think the flag allows for that opportunity to not stand. I think that's part of what our country hopefully should represent. I can also understand the impact of people feeling a certain way about the flag or where it is. And I think in some cases it gets co-opted for other perspectives or meanings. Personally, I like the country that we live in. It's got its flaws and there are things that obviously I would love to change about it. But I also realize it gives us a lot of the freedoms to think and act in different ways, which is also good. I just wish everybody else respected everybody's ability to act or not act in certain ways as well. So.
Just a reminder, during COVID, when we were online only, we did not do pledge of allegiance.
It's actually why I was kind of surprised and caught off guard because I started the board when we were virtual. And then when I came back to in person and I first saw it, I was like, oh, this is interesting.
Yeah.
But I did notice other school districts, even though they were online, they still did it.
Yeah.
So is we hear it's an RCW, so is the question specific to the board meetings?
Yeah, kind of. And also I was just like, I think I've been ruminating on, would it be worthwhile to even develop a district statement around, I don't know, around things like the Pledge of Allegiance. Because even if it is that there's an understanding that young people don't have to participate, have we explicitly named that as a district? Or, acknowledging that like the history of even the fact that like the words under God didn't get added to the Pledge of Allegiance until what? The sixties, right? And so like so many of these things, and also like not everybody believes in God, right? And so how do we maybe bring just a perspective from a district level that we are still gonna honor and recognize and do this thing? And yet here is like really the history of what it means. And here's what we believe about this thing.
So if you start unpacking history, because there's so many things you can, I mean, like
Yes.
the flag alone, you can unpack a lot. And if people are already having issues with critical race theory, then that's a whole nother level. But I think that outside of not having a statement, I think that we have a generation of young leaders that if they don't believe in something, they're just not going to do it, right? So I can almost guarantee if the student does not want to pledge allegiance, they're going to stand there, or they're going to sit. They're going to do either or.
Yeah.
So I don't think that anybody is in their mind forced to do the pledge of allegiance, even little people, right? They probably have conversations with their mom or dad, and they're like, well, don't you do this, or make sure you do this, right? You have this conversation. So I don't know if necessarily having statements are they can work in your favor or they can be damaging, depending on how the statement, because you can make a statement, but if it's not reflective of how everyone feels, then we may be opening up a whole nother can of worms, especially when it comes to something like this. If we were doing a statement like, we believe that every child succeeds, that's something we would hope that everybody can stand by, versus let's break down the flag, and or if you don't stand, here's some rationale, or not rationale, here's some history behind what these words mean, or what the original words were, or what was contingent on these words, what so-and-so did in order for these words, or even the stars, right? Or even who made it, there's just so many different layers in this one area. So to me, it's like all or nothing. We can't just talk about small pieces of it if that is the route that we wanted to take. It's the whole idea behind it, and that is layer under layer under layer under layer, and then you get people and emotions and feelings, which is fine, but we just have to be very
Navigate it well.
If that is the route that we want to go. We are very all aware of what that full picture looks like.
I guess I would say too, in my experience as a school principal at various elementary schools, kindergarten teachers always did a really excellent job with kids of like teaching why this is like, here's a thing we do to start this, kind of like they teach instructional tools, like here's how we walk in the hallway to go to the gym. Here's how we start the school day. Here's a book. You can stand and say this with us. You can sit, you can stand and not say it. Your job while this is happening is to show respect for others by, I don't know, because I have not seen it here, but I will say I've always been super impressed with how kindergarten teachers navigate this thing that schools are required by law to do without wading into with a 5-year-old some of the heavier emotional pieces with it.
And I noticed at graduation, they made a statement about if you feel comfortable, or if you want. And that was, that's a lot of our elementary teachers start the day with a flag salute. I should say some. And the children are given an option. Just be respectful during that time.
Yeah.
And PCSD does have kind of a statement, so I can certainly get theirs when they start theirs. That does kind of acknowledge that not everybody, is going to stand. So we can certainly look to see, I think other districts do probably have statements that go along with it.
Veronica, I agree with everything you said, and I think I'm super interested in being I think it'd be super dope to be a district that really lead into that and have those layered conversations and figure. I don't know, maybe we can, but because I almost wonder too. Options, amazing, right? I think that's great. And if we're still not really, we know history curriculum is so flawed. And so if, are there ways that we can then incorporate, it's not just about silence, right? But it's actually about, ways that we're talking about the history components of it too. So like, yeah, I don't know. I know it's a big probably thing to really think about. And I wonder what makes us fearful or worried about really leaning in and engaging in that type of really critical, I mean, liberating, I would think, work.
I can say. I'm gonna do a bird walk and bring it back in. We talk about enrollment and how we want our families to lean in and come to us. And if they see that we are okay with not following laws in one area, I wonder how they might feel about. If they would do that, what else might they do? That's just one area that I think about. Not to say that we should or shouldn't, I just want to give us that perspective in terms of we say enrollment, in terms of we say we want to draw people to us. I just want us to be mindful of how other people may interpret that or the impact we may be causing as an indirect for us being bold in that way. Sure. Yeah.
I'm 100% and think that, I mean, I'm not in any way recommending that we are not following the law. I think we can, at least in many aspects, my perception is that so many of the laws that we have are really problematic, right? And so it's more about bringing awareness to the fact that this is something we have to do, and here's why that ask is actually pretty flawed. We're going to do it because that is our legal requirement. However, here's that depth and the history of why this law is problematic. And so then we're raising a generation of people that can say, that law needs to go away. Or that law needs to be adjusted, or we actually do like, you know, so I'm 100% not suggesting that we break the law or that we're not in alignment with the laws. You know, and this is probably my own personal advocacy thing of like how can we actually be like push to advocate to change these things that are actually just, I mean, if we think about why does that law exist, it's probably ultimately about conformity, right? We're trying to get them in this routine of pledging allegiance to something that may or may not be, you know, so, you know, why do laws exist? Some of them, it's about conditioning, right? So like, I think it's not about not following the law, it's about how we really look at it critically.
Not have it at the board meeting because we are not required to.
We're not required to. I think it's important. I think as you alluded to, if the schools are doing it, we should do it. So I would rather have have more open dialogue about it. And grapple with the nuance of it and still do it.
So is it, I mean, it's not related, but kind of related, right? So is it kind of like the land acknowledgement? Because if you really read the words of the land acknowledgement, all kinds of stuff is being called out, like, you know, labor on the backs of like, it's like, you know.
Planning.
Or, well, right, you know, I've been in meetings where I'm like, ooh, that was heavy, and we start continuing with the meeting, right? And so I'm like, you know, like, I'm just like, that is, you can't get
On
more
your
real than that, than some of the ones that I've been a part of. But, to that point, is that something you're envisioning, right? Like we pledge allegiance to this flag, but here's a little bit of context at every meeting. Okay, I'm just trying to follow.
Yes.
And I did notice at the board meeting, when we do them, people stand, and there are many people who don't say the pledge, they stand, and they're respectful.
And again, I mean, I think it's a good conversation, just talking about the differences and different perspectives that people have. Some may stand, some may not. Some may say the pledge, some may not. And all of that's okay, because it's a whole range of how people respond to that. Yeah. But I'm also, I do get, you know, I think it's a good conversation to have. I think it's a great conversation to have, especially when you're talking about in the classroom and social studies classrooms, time immemorial, all of those pieces that talk about, you know, when we're talking about schools and the way in which we do things, like it's an interesting one. And we're not unlike lots of other countries that have very similar things that happen to them. Also acknowledging that we have recent immigrants who get their citizenship,
Citizenship,
and they
yeah.
are extremely proud.
Mhm, to
And
excite that.
would love to be that, like, it's all, I mean, it's all of those things, right? So, yeah,
Trust me, I understand, like yeah, the complexity is real.
yeah. But yeah, I think we can look and see what other, I know we're not the only ones
It's-
who look at that.
Yeah, I think I just echo some of the point. First of all, as far as, yeah, if it's a law that students have to do it, then it should be in the board. And yeah, I've talked to immigrants over the years, and you know, I think having some conversation about it would be interesting from a variety of different perspectives. Part of it, I mean, I've been doing it since kindergarten or whatever. So at some point it becomes just perform something that you just say and you don't really think about it. And it just, on the one hand, for some people it can have some, as far as, yeah, I wouldn't want to necessarily open up the can of worms by just saying we're going to ban it or something like that.
Absolutely not. No.
That would not be a priority. However, having some, some conversation about it, that could be good. Exactly what form that would take, I'm not sure. But yeah, it's, I mean, as it exists, it's pretty accommodating. I mean, the law, you can not do it until the law, but, yeah, it's not super high on my priority, but, trying to figure out some way to discuss it in more depth would be good.
And I think to me, why I think it stands out as a potentially an opportunity too, is like, when we think about like being a anti-racist organization, right? Or focusing on anti-racist practices, I think naming history, right? And speaking truth to history that we have been, allowed to ignore for so long. I think that to me is so much of the importance of it. Again, particularly as an educational institution, we have the opportunity to actually shed light on things that have been ignored for so long.
Can we be that bold in other areas too?
Please.
Yeah.
Bold in all of them.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, yes,
Some people know all
yeah,
of it.
okay.
And I was like, and kind of to the prioritization pieces, I always think about things that people can grab onto to use as a distraction to do some of the other things that we prioritize. Like, oh, now I don't want to talk about that. Let's focus just on the flag and
Mhm.
kind of grab opportunities to distract from other work. Not that I would say this is a distraction, it's not. I mean, I think there's good conversation that can happen, but I always think about the things that start to bubble up or elevate, and then people just want to jump on those because then they want to come off of the other priorities that we have. So they create something new.
Could be interesting I'd love to hear some student perspective on this. Somebody in a civics class, do some research and give us a presentation on it or something.
It's interesting that you said it, because as a former principal, we would stand and say it every day, and some kids just opted out not to say it. But one student, as he was walking home, said to me, Dr. Borche, you have us say the flag, the flag, you have us do the flag salute every morning. Do you really believe that this is one nation, where there's liberty and justice for all? I said, well, that's a really hard question. But I'm going to challenge you. If you think it's not, then what can you do, since you are really bothered by that? What can you do to make it that? So yeah, having conversations is always interesting, the way
And that
people think about it.
could open up the whole thing about, what are teaching curriculum. in
Uh-huh,
schools,
uh-huh.
And all which is a great conversation to have.
It can all be connected if we make the connection points, right? And so that's what I think is like, we can keep it centered on the students, and then this actually relates because, right, it's these components that relate to the curriculum that we're teaching, that relate to this and that. And it's
But I'd also like to hear from some new immigrants.
Yeah.
And their perspective on it.
Yeah.
Because there's a wide variety of, yeah.
And then, so one of the things that I've done in the meantime, kind of for the next meeting, and someone that I really respect, kind of gave me this thought, is that to potentially shift the land acknowledgement actually come before the flag salute. So we're first recognizing the land, and really the ancestral, points of that, and then recognizing the flag. Again, just kind of honoring, first the land that was stolen, and then now what exists here. Any thoughts, pushback, around that?
Sounds reasonable.
It's fine.
I think as a board, we could order the
You
agenda.
could-
I know, but I don't like this still, I just,
No, I think it worked. I mean, I think it, to kind of have that, I think that order is actually kind of, because you're starting local and then you're kind of expanding out. So
It's also more historically
right,
exactly.
yeah,
chronological as it were.
That's what.
yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Well, thank y'all for first letting me be super uneloquent and how I brought that up, but then, think grappling with that, we appreciate it. And if you have other thoughts, see your wheels keep turning.
Yeah, that's so funny, because I'm.
If you have other thoughts, we can totally keep talking at another time and now we're.
Well, I just want to say something really quickly. So I know that one of the, not ideas, but, I want to use the word movements, but I'll just say movements for what I'm trying to say, is the inclusion of all, right? Regardless if it's race, ethnicity, religion, gender identification, whatever the case may be. So I know that that has been big, right? Even like from the bathrooms, the conversations and things of that nature. And so when it comes to the flag salute, I feel as though we meet that mark by not making it like mandatory as far as you have to participate, right? Because again, to your point, not everybody may believe in God, or somebody may not believe in liberty and justice for all because they have been harmed by the system, right? And so I think that as far as that inclusion piece, making sure that different and all voices may be heard at some level, that is being accomplished by students having that freedom to just stand or not stand, but be respectfully quiet while others engage in the class.
As the word God is, that's in the whole, I mean, you have a whole discussion about how do you define God? I mean,
Yeah.
it expands.
Well, but again, if we're thinking about the context of the history of this particular country and what, it's very.
Yeah, I understand where it came from, but.
The white
Yeah.
God, unfortunately, that's
Sure.
actually true.
But
Sorry, I forgot I'm being recorded, my bad. I'm very passionate about this particular.
So next steps are you.
I don't know that there is one necessarily. I think I would just like to keep maybe, talking about what this might. I mean, I think that this feels like a good next step for me. I might at least feel better about kind of the order of that, and I think let's just keep thinking about it. Maybe.
Please eat more cake. I mean, luckily I'm seeing my boys tomorrow, so they'll devour whatever. Take some.
Any final thoughts about anything from today?
Thank you for the conversation.
Yeah, but it was good conversation.
Outside of it being Saturday.
All right, well, we will go ahead and adjourn just a few minutes early, so I'll make a motion.
So moved.
second,
All right, all in favor?
aye.
Yes. I hope I didn't offend anyone. Please, I'm open to feedback if I said something inappropriate. Okay, okay.